welcome to the conditions report brought to you by Ski Uphill. I'm Kevin Hjertaas. I'm with MTN Guiding here in Banff, and under blue skies tonight in Banff. Looks beautiful up there. Yeah, for those of you that are new to the program, we got a lot of the same familiar faces. We've got Darren Vonk joining us for the second time. He's from Kananaskis, public safety specialist. How's it going, Darren?
Really good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me again tonight.
Well, you bet. Thanks for coming. And then moving a little to the west, we have Baranow, guidebook author and ski tour misery skier extraordinaire. Marcus, you there? I don't.
We had Marcus.
Yeah, we did. Oh, there he is.
He's coming back. He's coming back.
All right, we'll come back to Marcus. Everyone remembers him from all the other shows. And then moving further west, we got Zoe Ryan, Avalanche Canada forecaster. And you're coming from Revelstoke right now, Zoe?
Yep. Yeah, I'm in Revelstoke.
Awesome. And you've been out skiing because you and Darren are both getting ready for your ski guides exam, I think. Yep.
Yeah, I've been out skiing. Not yesterday. I was out the day before and it was pretty knee breaking, so I decided to take the bike out today. But yeah, I've been getting out a lot.
That leads me right to what we'll talk about later. We're going to talk about transitional snowpacks, you and I, a little later. And seems like it's definitely transition season as you get your bike out.
Yeah, totally. It's like we're not quite in our spring snowpack, but we're definitely seeing some big warm-ups, and it's feeling pretty spring-like in town, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. And we're getting close. Like the spring skiing looks like it's coming here really quick, so that's great. Totally. So just let everyone know and Joel, of course, from Ski Uphill, we got to say hi to you. How's it going over there?
Good. Yeah, people are getting stoked for some good skiing. Lots of people headed to the lodges this year. It's been a big theme the last two weeks, I'd say, for us. Like just people traveling from everywhere to go to like interior BC and go, lodge-based ski touring is like seems to be going crazy. And then like lots of WAPTA already. Yeah. So like the classics are like, nice weather, early, like late season, sort of like when the skiing is at its best and people want to get out and enjoy the sun.
Yeah, totally. They're all coming in there for their last minute gear, I bet.
Yeah, it's been a very busy time, and skiing at +10 and skiing at -20 is very different.
Yeah, good point. Well, so the sort of program for tonight, everyone, will be we'll talk to the three specialists there mostly, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on right now in the snowpack and what's going on in conditions, what's skiing good, what's skiing bad. And then we'll do a second round just talking about the weekend ahead, because it looks like the freezing levels are going up. Things are going to change here for this coming weekend, and that'll sort of lead into the spring season for us. And then we want to do something a little different this time. We're going to make sure each of our experts here has time to give you a good tip. So whether it's tips for steep skiing, tips for dealing with the transitional snowpack. Darren's actually going to talk to us a little bit about some tips for if you ever need a rescue or just being prepared for backcountry rescue, and Joel's going to help us a bit with steep skiing as well. So definitely stick around for that last loop. That'll be where we get the hot tips, the expert advice. And also tonight, Marcus has some North 45 masks to give away. So these are like anti-fog masks that are great for skiing, and I think Marcus is going to use a random number generator to figure out who's going to win those, and we'll give those out just before our last round, maybe 2/3 of the way through the night. I'll probably be here for about hour and a half, so settle in, grab a beer. Guess we got to decide if we're going to start on the east or west this time. Darren, you look ready. Why don't we start in K-Country?
Always ready.
Yeah, let's let everybody know just like sort of what's going on out there right now from a ski perspective.
So we've kind of just gone through our first big warm up of the year. Freezing levels in Kananaskis area got up to about 2,600 meters there yesterday. And we were finding moist snow on all aspects, so including polar aspects up to those elevations, and even higher on steep solar, so south and west facing aspects. And the steeper they were, the more affected they were. And that came with a big natural wet cycle that happened on predominantly solar aspects, but even all aspects down at tree line where it was kind of steep and really moist snow. So that's kind of the first big warm up. And the first big step in towards spring conditions. Some of the team, not me today, but some of the team I work with is out skiing today, and they found some really good skiing with a fresh 10 centimeters that came last night.
Nice.
That's sitting on top of a relatively well frozen surface snow that was there yesterday, on steep north aspects today, so those polar aspects. And they found quite good skiing. And then, as you can expect, getting down to the valley bottoms was a little bit more breakable, a little harder travel, and yeah, not great skiing down low. But yeah, really great skiing up high, steep norths right now is working out well.
Nice. And hey, just for everyone listening, remember the chat box is there for any questions, but I'll also try to just jump in. There were two terms there, Darren, just to make sure everyone's got them. Polar aspects, just meaning northerly facing slopes, and then solar aspects, anything that gets sun on them, sort of the whole range of sun affected.
Yeah, and south or east aspects wouldn't get as maybe predominant as a crust as maybe like a south or a west aspect. The sun would just have way more punch, so you can play, you can even break that down a little bit more. But yeah, exactly.
Sure. Awesome. And then you also added the steepness of the slope mattered, and that makes sense. If I think of the sun like beaming on the slope, if it's steeper, it's going to have more impact. It's going to melt the snow more, and then I guess when it freezes, that'll be a harder crust.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yes, has there been a lot of skiers out in K Country the last little while? Like, I mean, that's quite a change from a week ago to a day ago, I think, eh?
Huge change, yeah. We definitely noticed a small dip last week. It was actually quite quiet even on the weekends out there. We were a little bit surprised we were out there skiing. And then during the week, it actually was, steadily busy. There was definitely people skiing in the common drainages over the last bunch of days. And then yesterday seemed quite quiet. We didn't see many people out, which was, honestly great to see. It's a big change. It's a big change day. And I personally don't go out in those days very often. It's just when, freezing levels rise so high, unexpected things happen in the snowpack. I just give them a wide berth personally. That's kind of just a thing that I play by.
Yeah, that makes sense. So good to see a lot of people took the last day or two off as temperatures spiked.
Seemed like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And then how about out your way, Marcus, like looking at, Lake Louise area and 93 North, that area, what's been going on for the last while? How's it skiing right now?
Yeah, I think probably today and yesterday probably wasn't that great, but we just got back from a multi-day trip out of the Egypt Lake area, which is along the divide. For those who don't know, it's maybe 10-15 kilometers west of Sunshine. We were out there camping, so we were right in the snow. Yeah, we were right there when it was started to change, and we were actually supposed to be there for an extra day, and we just sort of decided to come home one day early because we were seeing how much that sun had impact. Yeah, the first night was pretty cold actually for this time of year, and then the next day the sun came out and stuff started coming down on anything solar. So anything pretty steep or east and south facing stuff, you're seeing avalanches. We saw lots of avalanches, not like huge ones, but consistent, always coming down on those solar aspects. And then a lot of the stuff that got skied during the trip were in polar aspects, and it was dry powder. Even the trees, as long as the tree canopy was like shaded enough, the snow stayed dry. The minute you got into something that wasn't shaded at all, it changed so quickly. On our last day, which was 2 days ago, coming out, even between our first and second run coming out, there was change just based on how much sun was getting impacted into that snow, to the point where the skiing just became not very good, to be honest. But yeah, people are skiing. Sorry?
Is that why you guys left today early, because of bad skiing or because of avalanche danger?
No, we just knew it was warming up. Our second night was quite warm, like you could be outside and it was middle of the night and it wasn't cold out. So that's a pretty bad warning sign. If you're out, like we're camping at 2,000 meters above sea level and it's like pleasant to walk around at 3 a.m., it's probably not a good sign for both skiing quality and also avalanche risk. And then we were just sort of tired of camping. So I think there's a combination. But yeah, and I'm glad we did, because yesterday was super warm in Lake Louise. Sun was out, and there was some rain. I mean, we would have been there when it was raining anyways, but it just goes to show that, yeah, same thing Darren was saying, you know, like this kind of thing happens in the spring, and layers you don't think about could wake up, or things you're not quite tuned into yet, because you're just in that winter vibe, could catch you off guard pretty quick.
Yeah, I drove through Lake Louise yesterday. It was definitely raining, hey? And
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was shocked. So the snowpack was probably shocked by it too.
Yeah, and I don't think the crusts are quite freezing to the point where you can really ski on it. We were talking just before, and you mentioned someone up on the 93 North saying that the dust on crust was dust on very thin crust, and that's never fun, to be honest.
Yeah, it did. I did see another report though too, saying that someone found an aspect that was actually skiing quite nice. That 10 centimeters was staying on top of maybe a denser layer, and so it probably can be found, but it needs a day or two to sort itself out. Hey, when you have like a winter snowpack and then you get rain, it seeps in the top, and then you get new snow on top, it almost kind of locks that moisture in. It's probably going to take a bit of time for that moisture to sort of equalize through the snowpack.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, just before we take off on the Rockies here and go see Zoe in the interior, the only other report I had was that there's actually I saw a few different reports talking about cornice failures, and that makes sense too. Hey, as things get warm and wet, those overhanging cornices are just losing strength and dropping. Did you see any of those around Egypt or around Lake Louise area?
Yeah, in Egypt Lake, we're seeing, yeah, like anything that was exposed to that sun is collapsing. We saw one avalanche, or we heard it first, and then we came out of the trees. We think we heard this one anyways. It was pretty close to us on the Monarch Ramparts. And yeah, there was a cornice failure, trigger the slope below to ground. And yeah, not like a widespread huge avalanche, but if you were in a big slope and a cornice above you collapsed and it went to ground, that would be pretty bad, I think, right now. And it's definitely, I think it's totally possible at this point. I know there's some other avalanches in the bulletin they were mentioning, like a size 3. I don't know the details on that, but I mean, things are changing, and so, yeah, cornices are something we need to look at, because there's some really big ones this year from that heavy snow in the early season. So yeah, keep your eyes up.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the impact, I think the big avalanches from the last 2 days were either explosives from helicopters or cornices. Yeah. And those are big triggers, hey? Like a big cornice fall on the slope is way more significant than a skier. So it makes sense that they're triggering bigger avalanches. All right. Well, how about more towards Revelstoke area there, Zoe? What's sounds like you haven't been out for a couple days, but what's going on out there?
Pretty similar to what both Marcus and Darren described there. We had a pretty big warm up. The freezing level got to about 2,300 meters, so that the air temperature was above zero into below alpine, which wasn't awesome for the snowpack. It means all that powder that we had last week was really wet and heavy and made for some pretty bad skiing and some dangerous avalanche conditions. So kind of took a step back there, and like Marcus was and Darren were saying, some big cornice failures happened, a wet avalanche cycle happened, and a couple of bigger avalanches that stepped down to deeper layers. It's kind of that time of year where we're not in our spring snowpack and we still have quite a few layers in the snowpack to deal with. Those deeper layers that we maybe haven't been thinking about recently might start to wake up. So we saw a little bit of that, and just making some conservative decisions recently. And then we got that 10, 20 centimeters of fresh powder last night, which is sitting on top of maybe a little bit of a refreeze or a crust in some areas, but for the most part, just kind of insulating that heat in there.
Do you think, you said freezing levels were at 2,300 meters. So would that mean like the high alpine, like north facing high alpine, probably avoided a melt freeze crust? Like they're going to be good skiing up there, maybe?
No, I went searching for it yesterday. And I did not find good skiing in the high alpine. I was also optimistic, but
Yeah.
I think that it got pretty wet to mountaintop in a lot of areas.
Ouch. That's tough. Yeah. It did sound like the north facing Rockies was skiing good up until yesterday, and then I think it may have avoided it, but we'll see.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we might as well kind of stay with you, and then we can go sort of west to east. Just talking about sorry, Joel?
Sorry, I'm just gonna stop you guys. Just because we were chatting a bit beforehand about how like average kind of coverage and all that versus what you guys are observing this year, and I thought it was really interesting to kind of know, like, you know, are we above and below average? And the other thing that I just gonna mention here is that so we have about 40 people tonight. So you know, I read that article about why not people don't post in the min, you know, on Avalanche Canada this week. So you know, we'll do that tonight. So we'll do two $50 gift cards for Ski Uphill for the two best pieces of beta in the chat. So
Nice.
you know, give us some beta, tell us where you've been going, you know, and then help us kind of get a better idea of what's happening out there, and you might win $50. So curious to know, like, you know, the versus average where we're sitting at, and what the coverage looks like.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, we'll add that to the list here as we go sort of west to east. And I'll also piggyback on Joel. I'm really curious, you know, who is out today and how things were skiing today specifically, because that is a bit of a change that's a little unknown. Yeah, Zoe, I mean, maybe before we talk about the weekend here and freezing levels and what's coming, do you have a sense of sort of where Darren was telling us earlier for K Country, but sort of in the interior and maybe even South BC, like where we're at for snow? It sounds like it's been a bad year for the South BC area.
Yeah, Southern BC has struggled a little bit for sure. They've had high freezing levels and some rain events kind of midwinter. So I think overall, if I had to guess, it's probably a below average year. In the Rogers Pass area, I think they still have 4 meters at Fidelity, so like 2,000 meters, and it's a little bit above average of a year. So pretty healthy snowpack in that area, and less so as you get south. And definitely the south is dealing with a little bit more problematic layers in their snowpack. So some more persistent layers that seem to be cropping up a bit more with these warm temperatures.
Yeah. I should have got one of our friends from like Nelson area on here. I see someone asking, but it does seem like it's been a tricky year there between surface hoar layers and then high freezing levels and dry spells. It sounds like a battle down there this year.
Totally, yeah.
Okay, well then if we did just sort of, you know, looking ahead at the weekend, I've only been focusing on the Rockies here for the weekend. What's coming your way? I think you're saying freezing levels are going back up. Are they going high?
Yep, we're getting some precipitation. It looks like for, I think, Saturday, the freezing levels are about 1,500 meters. Okay. So expecting some rain low down in town here. It's starting to feel pretty spring-like in Revelstoke, and then some snow up high. Mm-hmm. And then it does look like a little bit more long range on Sunday. The freezing levels might get up to like 2,000, 2,300 meters, which would be pretty high and probably, again, go to some bad ski quality and high avalanche danger in that period.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you guys get snow with a 1,500 meter freezing level, that could be great. You can get above that pretty easy. The Rogers Pass is 13 or something. Is that right? Where you park?
Yep. Yeah, 1,300 at the visitor center there. So there could be some really good skiing, I'd say, in the short term before it gets a little bit warmer.
Yeah. It could be a tricky weekend when that warm air comes in though. And then, but going ahead, I mean, we always look ahead to spring and like a more stable snowpack and the ability to have a bit more certainty. Man, we talked a lot about uncertainty this year. Now we get to talk about certainty. You know, after the freezing or after the high freezing levels, so the really warm temperatures, after those go through and it gets cold again, that should lead to a pretty stable snowpack, shouldn't it?
Totally. Yeah. Well, when we're on the rise to those high freezing levels, it's generally a good time to take a step back, like Darren was saying. The the snowpack still has quite a bit of a winter structure to it. We're not really in that full spring. We're going to see some cornice failures, some bigger avalanches probably. But then once we get that cooling trend, then the snowpack generally starts to get more stable, and we can kind of push out a little bit more.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we'll definitely be coming back to you here in a bit. But if we head over to Marcus, sort of the same idea here, just looking ahead at the weekend, looks like freezing levels aren't nearly as bad for the Rockies, Lake Louise, 93 North, that kind of area. What do you think? Is this going to be a good weekend for us?
Yeah, I think we're looking at a stable weekend, maybe. We're seeing cold temps coming in tonight, tomorrow, maybe for another day. And then we probably will see another switch, it looks like, for the long range. So yeah, maybe the next 2 days could be really great. The ski quality, who knows? We'll see, depending on how much like heat's trapped into that snowpack, or going into spring, it's really aspect dependent, height dependent. So if you do your homework and give it a good thought, maybe you'll find some really, really great skiing, really stable skiing this weekend. But then after that, I mean, it's anyone's guess. If the temps go up, then we could be right back where we were in the last couple of days. And that's sort of like the trend, right? Like you have warmth, you have cold, warmth, cold, and eventually that provides you with a great stable snowpack. I'd say overall the snowpack's probably in the a better shape than average. I think we're a little bit above average for snow depth. Earlier this season, it looked like we were going to be like way above, and then it sort of got pretty dry the last few months. But the snowpacks lined up. Like we had those heavy wet storms to start, and that created a very different thing than we're used to, I think. And we could see a great spring because of that.
Yeah, and this is probably the start of it. Hey, you get that moisture from the rain or from the warmth here, it lasts a while, and then as that all freezes, those are strong bonds. And we're not particularly worried about deeper layers right now. There's been a few big avalanches, but for the most part, the deeper layers haven't been on our mind. So this will, it could be the start of our spring skiing season, which we kind of wait all season for.
Yeah, hopefully.
yeah, hopefully.
Well, it's the Rockies, so who knows?
yeah, totally. It could be a long ways off, but I'm optimistic. We're gonna come back to you, and we're gonna talk a little bit about camping and like some winter camping tips from you. I'm looking forward to that. But I was just gonna put in your mind too, we should maybe just talk briefly about glaciers, because it really is sort of WAPTA season's kicking off and a lot of the big glacier skiing stuff. So when we come back, we'll maybe hit on that.
For sure.
And then how about your way, Darren? What's going on in Cape Country, you think, for this weekend? And then just looking ahead here at the developing snowpack.
Yeah, I kind of echo what the two have kind of mentioned already. And the one thing I guess is looking forward to Sundays. We're not seeing a great refreeze again Saturday night, Sunday morning. And our bulletin, you'll notice quite a little bit of a spike in the hazard. I think that's related directly to the lack of a freeze and kind of warmer temps moving in with a little bit of snow, not much, 5 centimeters, maybe 20 centimeters by Tuesday. But yeah, I think you can find some good skiing. You're just going to have to work through the kind of lower valley bottom crusts, solar aspects, just kind of crappy travel until you get to the good skiing up high. But yeah, the weather Saturday looks okay. Sunday looks a little bit claggier, some snow kind of moving in, but the winds don't look like they're picking up too much. So I think it'll be just a nice kind of spring weekend. It certainly feels like that out there right now.
How do the freezing levels look for Friday night? Like, so if I'm going out skiing Saturday, is there a pretty good refreeze Friday night?
I think it was looking like that. Actually, I'm just pulling it up here. I think it was looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's something worth maybe describing for everyone too. Just so we're not, as we go into this spring, we often call it the diurnal cycle, where it's like warm days, cold nights, warm days, cold nights. And the avalanche danger, the bulletin will say diurnal spring. It just means the avalanche danger spikes during the warmest times and then tapers off during the cold times. So it's not just the high temperature every day we're looking at. It's how cold it gets every night and how much that refreeze happens, right?
Yeah, so looking towards tonight, up at Bristol Pass, a little around 2,200 meters, they're calling for -15 tonight. So anything that got wet or moist snow is going to be rock solid and potentially even carry your weight. As you know, a term you might hear sometimes is kind of bridging. You might actually be able to walk on top of that crust. And then a very generic description that would be, you don't have to worry about what's going on underneath your feet at that time. You're kind of not able to penetrate the snowpack, but that breaks down. That doesn't count when you're close to rocks or boulders, thin areas. That's when those kind of rules change a little bit. But -15, that's cold when we had, I think +18 in the Bow Valley yesterday. That's going to be a really hard surface that's most likely frozen tomorrow morning, providing probably some pretty good skiing.
Yeah, especially if the fresh on top has managed to stay cold, and we have that sort of dust on crust in some spots. That'd be great. Yeah. The other thing I was just going to ask you about K Country, it applies to. I was going to ask Marcus too there, but 93 South. I guess if we want to talk about, someone was mentioning earlier just how access was, because the river crossing there is a major problem, and I assume with the rain this week that is no longer an easy crossing. You'll be full boots off walking through the river. I think there's a lot of that in K Country too. Hey, like, are we starting to lose access to a few spots because of that? Because of melted out rivers?
We're seeming okay at this point still. There's not a lot of bridges out, but a lot of them are thin and have been thin all winter, but they've stayed intact just due to the cold conditions. And someone actually mentioned people were packing snow into river crossings in the past. You'll see that in K Country too a little bit. People actually throw snow, or actually they'll spend just a half a moment, throw a bunch of snow on top of bridges, and they just prolong them. But this gets to the time of the year where you might have to go and take your boots and your socks off, do a little dance across, and continue skiing on the other side. And that's almost common play in the spring. You sometimes got to walk across open pools of water to get to the skiing on the other side. But at this point, most bridges are in good shape.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm tough enough. My little feet are pretty sensitive.
I'm not anymore.
It's got to be pretty good skiing on the other side, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Joel, before we go back to everybody and just start talking about some tips for spring, I was wondering, you guys have a good ski crampon selection there these days? Because we've been talking about melt freeze crust everywhere. I'm guessing it's time to carry ski crampons everywhere.
Yeah, it started early this year, and like people were starting to get ski crampons back when we had the last snow talk in February, and we had that pretty bad conditions for a bit, and the coast was getting warm, and it's not bad. Like it's usually we like a lot of the retailers get like a late season order for that stuff, so we're usually able to kind of last well into May. Plan ahead, it's like always, I think especially if you have bindings that are difficult to like outfit, fritchies and shifts and that kind of stuff, you need like a specific crampon. And we're seeing a lot of people get caught up a little bit, like, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow, and you're like, well, yeah, like there's only so much one can do if you're not like in a big center, right? And you have something that's hard to find. So otherwise, I think we're pretty well stocked, but we're definitely seeing a lot of like that glacier gear. And like skin wax, right? All the things that can make or break your trip are getting very popular these days. And it's kind of standard for, April, which is really like, the heart of that kind of glacier traverse lodges season where people just get out a lot more.
Yeah, Marcus was saying that only one person in his group had skin wax, so they had to break trail the whole way. But I know I had a group last week that one person didn't have ski crampons, so we just couldn't go up a couple steeper slopes just because that one person had. So I'll definitely be sending everyone over your way to get ski crampons before we go. Sweet. Well, hey, we were gonna do a round here of just talking to everyone about some tips they got for a few different things. The expert advice on some things coming in spring here. But I see that Darcy. Yeah, Darcy beat us to the punch there. Marcus, Darcy's asking you, what sort of equipment you use for your annual Egypt Lake trip, and strategies that keep you warm, I guess.
Camp
morale.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so I'm gonna just share my screen here. Let's see. Hopefully that works. Everyone can see that? I don't. So this is actually from this year. I went through a lot of pictures to looking for pictures, and I realized I don't actually take pictures a lot of my setups for camping. But I found a few different ones here. I'll quickly go through. Here's the main area for this year's Egypt Lake trip. You know, I picked this one first because we got these two tents. This one's a single wall tent on the left. I don't know if you can actually see my mouse, but
Yeah.
oh yeah. So on the left here, you got a single wall tent. And then you got a two wall tent over here. You know, the point of this kind of presentation was to show the different styles, I guess. So these are something that most people, when they first start winter camping, they're going to want to do. They're going to want to take a tent. That's what most people are familiar with. A single wall tent like this one, it's just like a marine one. It's really small. It'll fit two people, but just barely. No gear or anything. It's going to be super light. You're going to have more problems with condensation. Generally, these don't breathe as well because you don't have that airflow like a two wall tent, like the one on the right here. This is like a car camping tent. These guys brought this 3-person one in, and they were really comfortable, but their backs were sore by the end of it. And that just sort of is going to be a constant theme through this little mini presentation. The less you bring, the lighter your pack, but the less comfortable you'll be. So they're super comfortable, but it's like a 6-pound tent or something. I don't know what this one weighs, but a lot less. For morale this year, I brought in a 20 by 15 foot tarp, which is a little crazy, but we could fit like 10 people in here. It was really fun. Everyone was having a good time. 10 people underneath a tarp with snow walls becomes quite warm. So it's quite comfortable. Everyone had their stoves in there. My back was a little sore from bringing it in, but it's worth it for morale. And the things keeps blocking I can't switch because hold on. There we go. All right, so the next, a little less comfortable. So this is actually a tent that we just don't use the inner. So this is my girlfriend, Anna, having a little snack. This was pretty cold night, like -25, -30. And all we've done here is use the tarp of the tent. And then we've dug down a bit so we could actually stand up. So a little bit of morale there. Being able to stand in your shelter is really nice, but it does require a little bit of work. I mean, you can also just take the tarp, set it up, and sleep without having to dig in, but you won't be able to stand up. This is not winter camping, but it's the only picture I could find of my foremid here at Robson. But yeah, foremids are becoming super popular. Basically, it's just a pole, or if you use a ski, if it's snowing heavily, just in the middle here. This is a 4-man shelter without the inner parts. So if you just use the tarp, you're looking at about 500 grams. It's Dymenia. You can get a black diamond one that's quite cheaper and it only weighs maybe 200 grams more. It's made out of sill tarp, but those are becoming super popular. Here is just an A-frame. So this is just a flat tarp. So all we've done here is we have trees on either side. We string it between 2 trees. We throw some snow along the edge. And then usually we put our bags on either end. So block a little bit of wind, but usually we have trees there. Not super great in the Alpine, but if you have like just a snow wall on one side, and then you can throw your gear on the other side or make a little wind blockage, it can work really good. It's really fast to set up. A tarp like this weighs about 200 grams, will fit in your pocket. And you can get a sill tarp for maybe 100 grams more. and maybe $200 cheaper. So still really light and inexpensive if you went with the sill. This is what we were using at Egypt Lake. So same tarp, just a different setup. Basically, I cut out, I measured using a probe, the width of 2 beds, and then the length, and I've just cut out basically a snow profile pit. So this one took me like 30 minutes to cut out, maybe even less. Pack it down, cut a little square out, throw the tarp up. Obviously this is much more open air. So, if it's super windy or whatever, you make sure that the wind's coming up and over it, not the other way, or you'll get a lot of snow. And now we're getting into some more, rough kind of things. So this guy we actually dug this, not expecting someone to sleep in it, but they got in really late and they saw this hole. So they jumped in the hole, put their tarp over it, and went to bed. So, for quickness and, just for a night, it's really not that bad. But again, now we're moving into the less comfortable situations, but quite quick to set up. You dig a little thing, you throw your bag in there and you go to bed.
Looks like in every one of those scenarios, you had like a pretty good inflatable mattress and then like a really warm sleeping bag. It's just like the tarp tent changed in each one. Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part. If we look here, we got some pretty big sleeping bags. We got high R rated value sleeping mat. It's a winter mat. These are -30 sleeping bags. They're only half bags though, so they only come up to your like belly button. And then you wear a very large down jacket. So that's another way to save a lot of weight. Some people will not enjoy that because it's not as warm as a full mummy bag, but it's about a third of the weight. We use these things almost exclusively now, these half bags.
Nice.
But yeah, you need you need something to keep you off the snow, and then you want to try to keep the wind at bay. Those are kind of the factors here, and then obviously the insulation of the sleeping bag. Here's a Todd Joyelle special. Mm-hmm. He just has a baby sack. Interesting. Speaking to air mattresses, this night his air mattress actually got a hole in it, and we didn't have a patch kit that was adequate enough. So he slept on the ground. It was pretty warm. He's a pretty tough guy. But basically all he did is he has a baby sack, and he's just dug a little hole. He puts his feet in there to provide some insulation, but again, not too much. But this kind of setup takes like 10 minutes to set up. You're digging a wall and you're digging a little hole, throw half your body in a hole. If you have a tarp, you can easily set up even a half tarp. You can set up a little thing if you think it is going to snow. It was a high pressure system at that point, so we weren't worried about snow. We were pretty much just sleeping under the stars. Here's Chris. You can see Chris Moneypenny having a look at me. We're up on the WAPT, as you can see. Gordon's just up here. All of Nick over there. Here, yeah, we're just sleeping straight up on the WAPT on the ice field. We've cut down into the snowpack. We've built some shelves. We're actually connected here, I think. So we're kind of sharing a little bit of warmth for our bodies.
You talked about camp morale.
Sorry?
You talked about camp morale. There you go. You
get we're just like, rubbing our feet together to keep it warm. But we did have tarps, but it wasn't really windy. It wasn't snowing. So we just sort of went with it. But this, I mean, I don't have a picture of a snow cave. I try to look for one. This is about as close as I could find for a picture of like a proper snow cave. It's getting pretty close. But the times that you can actually make a full snow cave, it's quite warm. Obviously you don't need a tarp even. Although in the Rockies, even if you're planning a snow cave, I would suggest bringing a tarp because you might not find snow deep enough, or it might be too faceted. But yeah, it gets quite warm in a proper snow cave. The problem, of course, is, yeah, you don't have to carry a tent. You don't have to carry a tarp for a snow cave, but you do need to dig a snow cave. Even digging something like this takes a considerable amount of time and a considerable amount of energy. So if you have the time and the energy, maybe you can make up for it with not bringing a tent. I don't know, but that's sort of the what would I call it? Yeah, the span of different kind of things. You know, if for people that are looking to winter camp for the first time, I mean, I guess we're not in winter technically, but it's the same kind of thing. It's mostly the same problems, but it's definitely a little bit easier as you get into spring, just because you're not going to get surprised most likely with a -40 or a negative, anything like that. So it's a great time to go winter camping and figure it out. Yeah, I would suggest probably taking a tent your first time, or at least bare minimum a tarp. And then of course, like you said, Kevin, a winter sleeping pad, winter sleeping bag. And I would like go over, if you think it's going to be -10, bring your -20 bag, bring some extra clothes. Definitely be prepared to stay warm.
There were two good questions just to follow up on that from the chat box. One of them was just what kind of stove you take, if you have any tips there. And then the other one was how are you getting your boots or gear to dry out? Like, are your ski boots coming with you in your tent, or is there any solution there for wet gear or warm boots?
Yeah, so my favorite thing, I always tell people, single wall metal water bottles. So everyone wants to bring their vacuum like sealed, their plastic Nalgene's. I bring the cheapest garbage single wall metal because you get the most heat transfer from those. Generally speaking, the crappier the bottle, the more heat gets transferred through it. And it's almost, up till this point, you're always thinking like, no, I don't want to lose heat, like I don't want my water to freeze. So when you go on day trips, you're bringing the nice insulated bottles, but I can't count the number of times where I've been soaking wet. I take my bottle, I'm literally ironing everything out. I take my sock, I put the sock right over the bottle. Within 5 minutes, the sock, it could go from soaking wet to dry. When I go to bed, if it's not super cold, I'll get 2 hot water bottles with boiling water. I put both in my boots, and in the morning they're dry. There's lots of different tips and tricks. Different things work for different people, but the single wall metal water bottle thing is something I've relied on for the last decade.
Nice.
That's like my prime thing I use.
And then different fuel, like different stoves. I guess we're going in the spring here. We're not talking about -30, but there's definitely some concerns if it is getting really cold, like maybe your summer backpacking stove isn't going to be ideal.
Yeah, so I mean, I use pressurized fuel. I know in all my mountaineering and prepping for guiding and stuff, it was like you have to use liquid fuel. You have to do it, and we were forced to during all our trips. But I use jet boil, so pressurized. But I do use it in a very particular way. It'd probably be too long to go into it here, but basically I cut. So I have my snow wall. How am I going to do this? Yeah. So I have my snow wall and I cut into the wall and I put candle. And then I take my shovel and I put like a chamber going up to my stove. And then I have my stove sitting there and the candle is heating. So it's almost like priming the tank very slowly. Like it's not touching the tank. It's about a foot away. So there's not like a chance of explosion or anything like that. And then I actually have my tank covered in a closed cell foam like mat that I've taped around it. It's removable. And you can use pressurized fuel like that. If you don't want to go through that, which if you want to check that out, you can look on my website. I could put a link here in a second in the chat. But otherwise, like liquid fuel, priming it, doing that whole thing. That's definitely like the more traditional fuel you want to use, or what most guides will probably use. But I still think pressurized works better. I like just turning it on and you get going. Don't have to worry about nothing.
Nice. No, that's super helpful. Thanks.
I don't know. Is there any other? I haven't watched the chat.
I think Darren's got a different take on that, so maybe I'll bounce to him.
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
hey, Marcus, before we go or leave you for a second, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about glaciers, but we also could then give away your North 45 mask as well. Hey, there's been a lot of good questions, and I don't know how you want to pick the winner there from your random list, but I'll let you figure that out.
Yeah, I'll figure it out now.
Okay, awesome. Hey, Darren, yeah, you and Zoe both are getting ready for your ski guides exam, so you've done some winter camping recently. I see here you got a different setup for your ski boot liners.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of things that Marcus said there. Yeah, I don't bring my shells into the tent. They just stay outside. You turn them upside down so they don't fill with snow and grit and whatever. But I bring my liners inside for sure. And then I also take the insoles out of my liners, put them in my hut booties. I almost always bring a really light weight of hut booties when I'm winter camping. And then that adds a bunch of insulation to my footwear walking around camp, and it also helps dry those out as well. And then, yeah, I'm a big believer in 500 ml size water bottles, metal, Nalgene, whatever, like Marcus said there. And you can stuff those inside your boots. You can stuff inside your gloves. You know, you have 2 or 3 of them in your sleeping bag at night, hot water at night for sure. It's really nice. Yeah, that just works really well. It's way more versatile than having one big, 1,500 milliliter water bottle that's really bulky. I have a bunch of smaller ones.
Nice. I like that. I've never actually thought of that, so that's great.
Yeah.
We want to talk a little bit about rescue and some tips for that, but I just have a hunch maybe Zoe's got some camping ideas too, because you guys are both going through your training for your guides exam. So you got anything to add? They hit all my camping tips already.
Yeah, they definitely nailed it. One thing that I'd like to hammer home though is like a good sleeping mat, like you were saying, having the close cell foam, and then a good like winter rated sleeping mat. That goes a long way, because you're going to lose a lot of heat through the ground if you have just your like little summer sleeping mat. So don't skimp on that. That makes a big difference.
And a lot of people do both, like the inflatable and the foamy. Both.
Yeah, that's my preference. I sleep pretty cold, so I try to stay warm that way, and it makes a big difference for me.
I like Marcus's trick of using his partner for warmth as well,
and morale. So it's a double win.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey Zoe, while we have you, I guess maybe we were gonna talk a little bit about any tips for dealing with this sort of mid-season transitional snowpack. Anyone that was with us last year on these calls would have heard us introduce the idea of a transitional snowpack, basically just going from that complex mid-season snowpack with different layers and everything to the spring sort of bomber melt freeze pack. There's a time in between, the Ides of March.
Yeah, it kind of feels like we're in the time of year where you can find a different avalanche problem on any aspect or elevation of the mountain. Right. And what I mean by that is like we're still dealing with dry snow up high, so we've got like our wind slab, storm slab instabilities, and then for the most part down low we're getting into a bit of a melt freeze cycle. And then on those solar aspects, so the aspects that face the sun, we're seeing crusts, and again, we're getting that sun really packs a punch. You can feel it right away when it comes out. So we've got our snow and wind creating instability. We've got sun. There's actually a lot to think about, and it's pretty fast moving time of year, and things change really quickly.
Well, I thought you were going to tell me that spring's safe and everything's good.
It will be. It will be.
Right. We just have to get through this. I think I remember saying last year too that when I started guiding, a lot of sort of senior guides would be trying to take a few weeks off in March, because March is historically when a lot of big accidents have happened, especially in the guiding avalanche world. Yeah, any idea on how to know when that's over, or when this transition has happened, or any other ideas around that?
So we're looking for like some really substantial warm-ups, and really getting into that more, like you touched on earlier, spring diurnal cycle, where we're seeing a melt freeze cycle. It's thawing throughout the day with sun and freezing overnight or not, depending on the temperatures. And that's another thing kind of to touch on. because we have melt freeze, which is when it melts and then it freezes well overnight. But if we get warm temperatures and a lot of cloud cover overnight, things might not actually freeze very well.
Okay.
So it just kind of stays melted. Or we might have a really weak freeze that breaks down super quickly. So once we get into that more predictable cycle and we're not dealing with our midwinter snowpack where we've still got quite a few layers that haven't been affected by the warmth in our mid and lower pack.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of take two things out of that. You were saying waiting until we've gone through a few good melt freezes, and just I always think of it as like the big shocks, you know. So this last few days have been a big shock to all of our systems as we're talking about mountain biking and all these 14 degrees in the valley kind of things, and the snowpack too is learning to accommodate that new temperature. And like once the big shock is gone and things become stable or normalized, the snowpack's probably gaining strength. So that's a good sign. Maybe that's how we'll know that sort of tricky area is done. But then I was also thinking back when you and I we used to work together at Sunshine and Sunshine Village. And I remember during the spring cycles, someone would go out, or there'd always be calls in the morning to say how much crust recovery there was overnight. So sure, it froze overnight, but is it like 1 centimeter refreeze crust, or is it like 20 centimeters of refrozen crust? And that's sort of, I think that points to how quickly it'll break down or how long your stability will last through the day. Is that kind of what you remember as well?
Yeah, totally. That's a really good way of putting that. And you want that really thick refreeze. It also depends on the temperatures of the day. So if it's getting really warm that day or the sun's really packing a punch that day, then it's going to break down really quickly. But really, when we're talking about that predictable and bomber spring snowpack, we're looking for a good refreeze overnight. And it's a timing game as well, and getting out before the heat of the day. And you're kind of trying to nail this window where the skiing has started to soften up, but it's still supportive to your skis. So you're not punching through, and that's when it starts to get quite dangerous. But it's like a supportive, fun corn skiing on top of that crust.
Nice. That was the perfect segue actually, because Joel was saying his tip today was going to be to do with when we're going out for those big lines in spring, how timing is not maybe as set as we think. Joel, do you remember what you were saying with that? That sometimes like people that are new to skiing bigger lines or dealing with spring stability, maybe we'll have like a hard rule, like we have to be home by a certain time, but really it's not that defined.
I think it's a kind of funny misconception. Sometimes people are like, oh, you have to be off the mountain by like a certain time, you know, and that's like a hard cutoff, right? But you know, I think like with what Zoe was just mentioning, like having a really good look at the forecast before you go to bed, and having a really good look at what actually happened and how, you know, how overcast it is and what the weather stations have been reading during the night to see if that's true. And then that can determine how good of a window you have, and also how much time you have, right? You can be in April and have an entire day if it's like, you know, you get a good freeze and it's overcast and it's not too warm. But at the same time, sometimes like even leaving really, really early is not necessarily enough for something that's pretty far away. So yeah, it's interesting to adjust. And like myself, I've been skunked more than a few times by like, you know, a -2 freeze. You're like, we'll be okay. And then like, it was overcast and you get there and it's like slush and you're like, oh, well, let's go back to bed, right? But yeah, I think like the whole kind of, you know, paying attention to what you're seeing versus what's forecasted is a really big, a very good habit to have for sure.
Totally. And if it's been, like you said, -2 for 3 hours overnight, the crust there is, if there is any, is going to be really minor. And if you're expecting a high of +5, it's, you know, you could get to a dangerous snowpack by 9 a.m. Or if it's -15 for 10 hours overnight and you're only gonna have a high of +2, you're probably skiing well into the afternoon, hey?
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, Darren, we were gonna talk, I mean, unless you had anything else to add to the spring timing thing. I mean, I know when you guys write the bulletins there in K Country or anywhere, you're often, one of the warnings is to, hey, leave early and be done early. And that is a good rule of thumb. I think Joel is just trying to introduce a bit more nuance to that sometimes early means something different than it does on other days.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it really is a moving target, and it requires a constant assessment all day in the field, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if we want to give some people a few ideas of what it would feel like, if they are out there too late, that firm crust that you start the morning on that's carrying you, as you're saying, on top of the surface. If you're punching through, okay, it's losing strength, it's breaking down. If your skis are punching through, you're probably maybe past the time. Maybe are there other rules of thumb or ideas we can give people?
Yeah, I think the big one for me is, those for sure. Watch a natural activity around, if you're actually seeing solar features, water leaking on the rocks, snowballs start flying down the snow slope, stuff like that. And I think the field and chat with them. And the big thing is, it's like, well, I only have this Saturday to go out and do this objective.
Right.
I mean, it's awesome to get up, but sometimes objectives take 3, 5, and 6 years to actually get done. You got to wait for those good conditions. And I think it's a hard thing to do, is wake up at 2 a.m. and go back home at 5 when you realize the freeze never happened. That's the sport.
I can tell you that the number of times I've come home to Banff after a failed mission and still seen everyone going home from the bar.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's hard, but that's the game. That's the longevity game right there. I mean, you don't want to roll those dice. It's not a game of longevity if you keep doing that.
Yeah. Matt here was asking if there's any good ways of keeping track of warming. I mean, the most obvious one is carrying a thermometer, and not just the little one that sits on your backpack, but one you actually can, put aside in the shade and actually keep out in the air is pretty invaluable. It always feels warm when you're going uphill, and the harder you work, the warmer you think the air is. So having that objective measure of how much it's warming really helps. Oh, it looks like Darren froze there for a sec. Other than just straight up temperature, like Darren was saying, you're looking for snow rolling, like roller balls. If the trees are all starting to shed their snow, that's a good sign that things are warming up. If you have your skis on and the snow below you is starting to slough off in these warm, wet slides, you probably have pushed it a bit too far. Hey Darren, if we have you back, I think it's going to be really valuable to have someone with your expertise talk a little bit about any tips for the rest of us on being prepared in case we ever do need a rescue, and then what to do if that were to happen. All right, that's what I thought. Okay, well, we'll come back to Darren because I am really interested in that. I think everyone else is probably too. Marcus, I see you gave we've given away your North 45 mask. And
so username Meadow. I just took a random number generator and went down the list. I'm already in contact with her in direct message, so I got her stuff. So congrats, Meadow. You won a mask. I don't know. Joel, are you doing yours? Oh, you're muted.
So I have a question. I'm really interested because Amy had a really interesting report there from Victoria Glacier with coverage probing and stuff. So I don't know if we can ask her to unmute herself and talk to us. Let's see. Yeah.
That's good because we were just about to talk about glaciers coverage. In general.
But yeah, so on oh. Anyway, but yeah, if you scroll up a little bit, there's a report about Victoria Glacier with high 280 to 320, which is pretty good for Victoria.
Nice.
And yeah, talking about just moraine skiing, and that was on the 22nd. That was 2 days ago. That was before the really warm day. But yeah, she's got a really good so I think Amy has to at least win one of those.
I think Amy's unmuted now. Amy, are you there?
Hi, sorry.
Do you want to tell us about what your stuff is going on there?
So we missioned out to Victoria Glacier. The weather kind of seemed, I was expecting it to be a lot cloudier than forecasted. But yeah, it was kind of like scattered skies, and getting onto like the below tree line, there was a bit of a refreeze, but like what you guys have been talking about, it was I'd say like a fair freeze for what you'd want in the spring. But as we got higher, the crust in east, or like solar aspects, became a bit more supportive to ski traffic. But as soon as you take your skis off, like you're punching through that crust, so you're definitely dealing with a winter snowpack beneath that. So yeah, climbing up through the trees, we try to keep to the most conservative terrain, mainly the summer trail we took. And then yeah, getting up to the moraines, getting onto the glacier, like there was definitely a lot of wind effect, and yeah, we weren't really stoked on our ski descent. So yeah, we went onto the glacier, probed around a bit. Yeah, I was pretty surprised on how much snow was there. It was actually my first time up there, so I'm not sure what it is normally like, but yeah, so ski quality was pretty bad when it was like a wind slab on facets. So you're like auguring under this wind slab and trying to keep your skis together. So I don't recommend anyone go there.
Well, the ski conditions may have changed, but the coverage wouldn't have. That's like really good coverage up there.
Yeah, totally. So yeah.
And that's the same sort of coverage we were hearing today from people coming down off the Wata, sort of that 3-meter average, coverage. Obviously thin areas where it's wind scoured and maybe the toe of the glacier and stuff, but that's pretty good up there. You mentioned the moraines being a challenge. I mean, that's always the challenge with glacier skiing. The moraines are the steepest terrain you're on, the most unanchored, the most avalanche prone, all that.
Yeah, totally. It definitely makes you think, and yeah, it's a bit slower travel, and like you don't want to ski it too late either, because they're quite steep, and the slope angle really plays a part to like that snowpack heating up as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the report. We appreciate it.
All right, sorry about my delay. I was washing the dishes.
Oh, that's great. So Joel, you got a little prize for Amy, I think.
Yeah, we're gonna email Amy a $50 gift card at Ski Uphill for all the awesome beta she just gave us. It's good to have like that early of a season. An idea of coverage in Victoria is like quite unusual, right? Or like we often, a lot of people venture in those areas before like late April and May even, right? So yeah, that's cool. And then I think we had Tarek earlier who had a report about skiing all that powder, which must be terrible, really, in the Jumbo Pass area, I think. And he said that they had 4-meter plus snowpack as well, around 2,000 meters, and it snowed 5 to 10 every day with 20 cm Saturday. And they observed a little bit of natural activity on steep northeast, but nothing really notable. And then there was awesome skiing and awesome trip. Yeah, that sounds like a really awesome trip. So yeah, those guys just sending me their emails, and we'll give them a gift card.
Awesome, that's good news. Well then, I mean, we're getting pretty close here, team, but we have sort of 3 more tips to roll through. We want to talk glaciers with Marcus quickly, talk rescues with Darren, and then I was going to throw in some tips for steep skiing and maybe get Joel to help out there too. Darren, you look animated again. I think we have a connection. Can we talk a little bit about as a parks visitor safety specialist, maybe what the rest of us can do to sort of prepare if we ever need a rescue, and then how to deal with it if we did ever need you guys and girls to come help us out.
No, that's great. Yeah. Sorry about the connection there. It's a great basement Wi-Fi. Yeah. So I guess, some of the things I chatted on our last Snow Talk there in February was, being, well prepared in your bag. And I won't go over that again in great detail, but some of the things would be, having a robust repair kit in the group. Everybody loves a really light, G3 bone saw for snow profiles. I get that, but they don't cut trees. A good tree cutting saw is invaluable for a multitude of uses: splinting, fires, landing zones. Having a tarp in your bag, Marcus mentioned, 200 grams, and they can fit in your pocket, and they can be used for so many different shelters, warmth, in rescues. That's really good. And so some of the things we really like when we're getting called out into the field is good comms. So whether that's an in reach, or I think the new spots as well, you can have that two-way texting, information like what's the weather on the ground where you are right now. What's the cloud cover? Is there no clouds, or is the clouds at mountaintop or treetop? Just simple like that. That gives us elevation bands to work with, where if we can make it through passes, or we got to come up through drainages. So just really simple weather beta. What the winds are doing, where you are, and what they're doing. If you see snow pluming off the top of mountaintops, you can include that. It's like, yeah, no, there's snow moving up high, and in the valley, it's really strong. And out of a general direction, it's out of the northwest, south, or east. Just something general, because we really love to land into the wind. Helicopters land into the wind. They don't like to have the wind at their tails. And with that, if you are stomping out a rescue or a helicopter pad, it's really great to, grab your skis and go stomp out a big pad, a 407, which is the helicopter that Banff, Jasper, and Kananaskis mostly use. In Glacier, you might use an A-Star, but it's generally the same ship. They're a pretty small helicopter. They really only need about a 10-foot, 15-foot stomped out pad. It's actually a pretty small footprint. You can stomp that out with your skis. That gives us some reference. If you can stomp that out close to maybe some small pecker pole trees, and like we're talking just a couple inch or feet above the snow surface, it's good reference for a helicopter. You can put a bag down, something like that. It's good reference for the pilots. And then never approach the helicopter. We'll always come out to you to approach. But yeah, if you want to give reference, that's great. And just stay kneeling on your knee. The pilots we get to use are exceptionally really good. They're all heli ski pilots, long mountain time flying pilots, and they're incredible. They can land a helicopter an inch away from your knee if you're kneeling. Really talented and really lucky to have them. So yeah, cut down trees. Don't be scared of cutting down trees further than you think a helicopter might need to land right in your area if you're in a flat meadow. The last thing we want to have is some sort of a strike with the main rotor, the tail rotor, anything like that. And then just secure. Sorry,
if the landing pads this size, you said like 10, 15 feet, the rotor's bigger, hey? Like they do need a bigger disc area around that.
Yeah, and helicopters are rarely coming kind of straight in. They're usually coming in from a direction, and which would be, into the wind if the wind was coming from, the left of my screen here. So yeah, just be liberal if you're going to be cutting down trees there for a helipad. Be liberal in cutting them out. And then securing anything loose. It's inevitable. Every time we land, we see stuff go flying. And generally it's flying away from the helicopter, like it's getting pushed away. But the last thing you'd want is something getting sucked up into the rotor, which would shut the machine down and be quite a dangerous situation. Yeah, other than that, it's, having good, concise, clear communication on the initial call, and then a nice clean landing site if you can.
Okay.
Really great.
Yeah, so if a recreational skier or someone is calling you, we want to know where we are, what the weather's doing there, and especially like wind and visibility, it sounds like. And then just start thinking about it's probably going to be a helicopter rescue of some sort. So how could a helicopter get to me? Where's the nearest spot that I could picture a helicopter landing? And
totally.
Yeah. And then the other one, just when the helicopter does come, just basically don't move. Have everything tied down and just stay still.
Totally.
Don't do anything silly.
Yeah. It's a very, pilots really like to land in known locations, heliports, helipads, kind of structured airports. And when you start landing in the fields in the backcountry, there's a lot of variables that are out of control. So we don't need extra people running around or stuff like that. It's a wild scene in that regard. There's a good question there from DRC, and it's we long line a lot of places we can't just land middle of slopes or in thick trees. Slinging is probably 95% of our work, and then every once in a while what we'll do is we'll sling to an open area, land, and then load internally to do the transfer with a higher level of care.
Can you just describe what a long line is?
It's a length of rope, essentially anywhere between 100 and 200 feet. We have extensions that we can use. That's attached to release mechanisms on the helicopter, and allows us to fly into a scene and then get lowered into a forest or in the cliffs into kind of terrain where a helicopter could never land.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like watching a movie. You see these guys and girls fly in and just like come within a foot or two of you and just sit down right beside you and unhook from the helicopter, help you out. It's amazing. We're all very lucky to live in a mountain range where that type of rescue is available and so well trained, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really amazing service, and yeah, thanks for that. It's yeah, I mean, there's someone between all the national parks and Kananaskis. There's 24-hour coverage for rescues, and flying's not an option at night for our neck of the woods. We only fly by daylight here. But yeah, we're here. And,
that's a good point, actually, that rescues, the helicopter rescue especially has to happen during daylight. And so I know most guiding operations and everyone, we like to be done skiing, be out of the field an hour before sunset, or some sort of rule of thumb like that, just because you do lose that security net.
100%. Yeah.
Awesome, Darren. Well, thanks so much for that.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.
Hey, before I jump over to Joelle and talk about steep skiing, Marcus, we said we were just going to talk about glacier coverage and sort of just looking ahead. I mean, the people come from all over the world to ski the Wapta and some of the other glaciers around here. It's kind of what we're known for. It's a big deal, and it's just around the corner. It's already started, I guess, even.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I know a few groups that have already done the Wapta. Sound like it was pretty good. I think the main thing for this year in particular is there has been some pretty big wind events. I know, like even mid-season, I read a report from Hector where it was just bare ice. So, and I've also read reports on the Wapta where in the middle of the ice field there's been lower than normal snow levels, where then the Lee glaciers off those ice fields are quite thick. So I think even though I think we have a healthy snowpack, it's just something to think about in the Rockies. As far as snow depths on glaciers are concerned, like, even if there's a lot of reports of thick snow, like on Victoria there, definitely bring a rope and definitely use it when you're traveling. Can
you explain why we care about thick or thin snow on the glacier, or like why?
Yeah, so we have crevasses on ice fields. They're giant holes for people that don't know. Some of them are very big, some of them are very deep. But with wind over the season, what can happen is basically cornices, you have a big hole, but cornices almost form and they join, and that hole's still there. It's not being filled up with snow. Some of these are, many, many meters. Some are probably 100 meters deep, if the bigger ones. And so, you might have a certain amount of snow on that, but as you're traveling over it, if you happen to come across a weak point, it could break, and you're going down it. It's not often with skiing per se. I've never fallen in a crevasse skiing. I've fallen in two while walking on glaciers in the fall. With skis, you have a bigger area, obviously, so you're kind of bridging that. But some of these crevasses are bigger than you, or bigger than your skis. And those larger ones with the thinner bridge are definitely something that you should be concerned about. And that's why we generally rope up in the Rockies. If you compare it to the coast, where they have like who knows how much snow depth over these holes, it's a totally different game. And even though people are quite familiar with places like the Wapta, there's still holes up there, especially in Balfour Col. Going over to Yoho, there's a crevasse field you have to go through. And it's not always, it changes. It's not a static environment. These holes are changing year after year. There's years I go up in the summer to the Wapta to take pictures of the holes, and the next summer they're different, or there's patterns, but they do change, and it's something to be aware of. Yeah.
That's a good point. And there are usually Parks Canada and maybe K Country, but definitely Parks Canada tries to get some photos up on their Facebook usually of what the glaciers are looking like in summer. So when you're planning your winter route, you can use those summer photos to kind of get a mental image of where some of the fractures and crevasses are.
Yeah, for sure. For those that don't know, I'll throw a link up here in a second when I have a chance. But Parks Mountain Safety on Facebook, it's an amazing resource. They do the WAPTA quite frequently, so they'll actually take pictures throughout the year, summer, like sometimes fall. Like you might get quite a few lead up pictures, and you can actually sort of start to build a really great like framework on how those mazes kind of slightly move or shift or have stayed the same maybe. And then you could also like judge like, oh yeah, Balfour Cole, you have some rock in the area, so you can actually kind of say, oh yeah, it's pretty filled in. Like that rock is at that point or whatever, and now those holes are gone, but that hole's still there, and that hole's so big, and so you start to try to get a mental image of, and then when you're actually there, you're not just playing it blind. You can sort of be like, yeah, I think we can cross here and we can go through here, and there's some concern in the next step or whatever. And any preparation is obviously great.
Yes.
One thing I'm really thinking about this year is that it was a hot summer, and we lost a lot of like the glaciers receded a lot this last summer. It's visible crazy every time I'm out. So I'm definitely aware that, especially getting on the glaciers and some of those usual breakovers and really crevassed areas might be even more intense this year than usual. Yeah,
I would agree. There's been some, if you go to the Parks Mountain Safety, especially this summer, there was one picture that was just like remarkable where the one part of the ice sheet almost like collapsed a small section, like, or it was quite big, but it went down. And we're seeing places like Pado, where there's been so much ice loss, not only just like moving back, but actually underneath. And now you're getting collapses. So you have these like ice caves showing up where you would never even, I would have never thought twice. I might not have been roped up. And now there could be a giant crevasse there going into a cave. Last year I was talking to a few glaciologists. I think I'm saying that right.
Got it.
In the area, and they were saying like these are telltale signs of a dying ice sheet. You're getting probably lakes forming underneath. You're getting these caves at all the glacier toes. They're starting to collapse in ways that you haven't seen before. So we're definitely, in the next 10 years, it should be interesting to watch, and maybe sad to watch what happens to these larger ice fields underneath these ice shelves. So like if you look at the Anabasca, it's like, at what point will that not even be skiable for access? Like there's cliffs under there, so eventually that's going to be cirques, like leveled cirques, and eventually you just probably won't be able to ski up them. And you're probably going to start seeing, we are starting to see that Pado a little bit. I don't know to what extent it will evolve, but and then the Balfour High Call could be a whole different game in 10 years, maybe 5 years, because I'm sure there's cliffs under that, because lower down you can see cliffs that are already not really skiable. It's not a route, but it just speaks to what could happen higher up, especially right at the call. We don't really know I don't really know what's underneath the ice there. So it could just be a big cliff that's going to melt out. Yeah, no, that's definitely all true. I think next time we talk, we'll probably be like well into the glacier skiing season, the steep line skiing season. So we'll probably have a bit more bait on that, but it's a pretty good lead into it. Thanks. Just before I go though, Joel, there's a question here about my boot drying technique. Will that ruin a heat mold?
I don't think so.
I don't think it's hot enough, right?
Maybe if it's like, if it was like really hot and like right out of the oven in your first day out, maybe it changed a little bit. But like, for like a boot that has a little bit of mileage, like at some point with the constant pressure, the foam doesn't really kind of bounce back. So I'd be very surprised. Yeah, that's what I figured. Awesome.
Well then, Joel, it's nice to have you because we want to talk a little bit about steep skiing. This is like the exciting time of year for all of us. So yeah, I thought you and I could just, drop a few tips, for people, getting into it and just some things we've learned along the way. I don't know if you have any on the top of your mind, but I could go first. Just, the one thing I often, if someone's new to hiking a couloir or whatever, one of the things that maybe is often a surprise to them or good learning for them is at the bottom when you're changing over, there's often a spot where you skin up to a couloir, and then there's a spot where you switch to boot packing. You throw your skis on your backpack and all that. I think it's really helpful. I don't know if you do the same, but I think it's really helpful if you basically switch over to ski mode there. So skins are off. I even put my boots into walk mode because I find it easier to kick my toes in. I don't know if everyone does, but helmets on obviously because things might be falling on your head as you go up. I usually make my poles shorter because that's part of my switch over, but just a lot easier to switch to kind of get yourself ready for the ski down because you don't always make it to the top where you think you're going to before switching to ski mode. If you get halfway up and think you're going to bail, nice to have your you don't want to be stripping skins halfway up a couloir. So kind of just getting ready there. Do you do that or do you do it differently?
Yeah, I do it differently, but I think it's really like I see your point because let's say you're booting up like on Granddaddy and like which is kind of like I call it like a classic kind of Bow Peaks or like more introduction line, although it's still very big terrain, but the skiing itself is like a little bit more approachable. There's a pretty big cornice to the top. So like if your transition takes you 20 minutes, you'd probably rather do it at the bottom of the, at the bottom and in safety out of the slough line than doing it at the top under the cornice if you're going to spend that much time. I find like I do often a diagonal carry where instead of doing like an A-frame here, I just do like both skis together. And I find that with the skins on, it's a bit easier to just keep like the skis from moving, right? But sometimes we're like, if there's like proper like a big cornice up there or something that we're going to be worried about when we get to the top, often we're going to do like the changeover at the bottom. You obviously put the helmet on all the time, even if it's like open and stuff. Like why not? It's in your backpack, on your backpack. It sucks to carry skis over a helmet anyway, so might as well. But yeah, I think like I look at it a bit more depending on the exposure and how much time you want to spend at the top. And yeah, that's the way that I look at it.
That makes sense. I mean, I think Granddaddy's a great example. Actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking, for a lot of people sort of getting started in steep lines, it's often a place they start. So that gives me a picture. And the one thing I've seen in there is like, some people digging out full ledges to do a changeover. I think that's quite a stressful thing for, if you're not comfortable in that steeper environment, the time where you have to like get your skis off your back. Really important you don't knock your partner off by bending over because you got your skis on your backpack, and it's so classic that you bend over and bump the other person on the head as you go to do up your boots. So you want to be really careful and have a nice spot to do that. If you're not, I mean, digging a ledge is a bit much maybe, but if you're gonna do that, great. Otherwise, I find the tails, digging your tails into the snow so you can kind of get a platform to clip in, and just really moving slow and methodical at the top. So it's like one pull, punching the snow. Yeah, that's good. Another pull. Yep, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna take my pack off. Yep. Like just really being careful there because anything you drop is gone, and then you're climbing down, and if you knock yourself off, you're going for a long fall. So yeah, just going slow at that changeover. Any other changeover techniques for you on a steep, gnarly spot?
I think like the bottom transition, people kind of pretty quickly. I used to be like oh man, no crampons if you don't need them. Right. When I started, I was like, I didn't bring crampons, like whatever. And like, I think nowadays, as soon as I start boot packing, I always put them on. Just like, it's always just a good safety to have. Like, oh yeah, it's snow, but like, what if something happens? What if you have to like move really quickly and not slip because something's coming down? Like, you have to be able to react quicker. And like, nowadays the crampons are so light. Like the gear has gotten like so crazy light and efficient that there's no reason not to carry that kind of safety equipment. So, crampons on, even if it looks like there's no ice, if you ever have to like do a little rock step or anything like that, or you have to like get out of the way quickly, it's so much safer. And having the ice axe handy, right? Even if it's like, again, it's snow, you're gonna use your poles, get the ice axe somewhere you can reach really quickly if something happens, like be prepared to react in the environment, right? I think like the changeover is also a really good time to look at the conditions. Like it's a bluebird day, it's nice, it's cold, nothing's happening. You're doing a transition at the bottom to start boot packing up. If you as you're changing, if you're looking at the line or you're out of the line of fire, but you're looking at what's happening, sometimes you're gonna see like, wow, there's like a lot of snow coming down, or like something's happening, or, oh, we've seen like a lot of really big kind of like, pockets release, and like, oh, it's looking a bit more windy now. So looking at those changes at the bottom to get an idea of what's like happening a bit more dynamically, and then reassessing as you go up as well. It's hard, and it's slow, and it's painful, and it's steep, but like looking up above when you're in a safe spot and checking, okay, like what's changing? Is the wind picking up? Are we seeing more sloughs now? Like, what's happening? Because like it's skiing steeps is great because you don't have to manage too much slab avalanches. Like often it's like small pockets of wind slab, and it's relatively stable, but like there's so much more overhead and objective hazard elsewhere that you have to pay attention to.
So that's a good segue actually to the other point I wanted to make. But before I do, I just wanted to double team you on the putting crampons on early. And I used to always think when I was young, you're like, oh, I'll put them on if I need them. But by the time you need them, it's really tough to put them on. So better to put them on early for sure. But yeah, you were just mentioning that, like, sometimes you're worried about sloughs and things coming down if you're in a couloir on the face, and that, and being wary of that and seeing, oh, it looks like other snow has moved here, or there has been rockfall here. I mean, that's critical. But it also had me thinking earlier that there's often a balance you're playing between, maybe you're going up a couloir and there's all these little edges where I can just climb up here and be under this rock, and climb up here and be under this rock. Okay, then I'm gonna cross over here, so we're under this wall. And those edges are often really soft and faceted and really slow to boot pack up. And if you're doing all these weird moves to avoid some overhead hazard, there's times that's really warranted. But maybe also you shouldn't be there if you're that worried. And other times I actually choose to be right in the shooting gallery, almost, you'd say, because that's where other sloughs have gone in the past and consolidated that snow, and it's actually much quicker travel. So you're almost playing the balancing game of being more exposed. Obviously it's a riskier place to be, where things will hit you from above. But you're in and out a lot quicker, which is maybe limiting your objective hazard over the course of the day. I don't know if you think about it the same, or if it's just always a rule.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you. It's always a calculation between like, what's going to make you faster and limit the time you spend in exposure, right? Like the faster you boot up and make it out of there, the less dangerous it is, right? But sometimes there's gonna be a little bit more snow coming down, and then the priority is to avoid getting like dragged down the slope. So for example, you're gonna like do small sections in that kind of slough line that's harder, and then try not to stop, and then stop in a safer area away from that. But if it's like plainer, harder, like hard pack, and there's nothing coming down since you've started and you're halfway up, like sometimes like saving half an hour just because you can boot back faster is more worth it than reducing exposure in a way, right? So I think again, assessing what conditions are, and then deciding a strategy at the bottom. Oh, who's the fastest person? Who wants to take over? Who's feeling bad today and doesn't want to lead? And then we'll try to make it up this high, and then I'll give you the lead about there. You see that safe spot there? We can reassess and take a break and see what's happening, right? But having a strategy, and yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, in fact, there's probably times in most couloirs or faces where you use both techniques, where you'd say, this above me is frightening me and are worth being concerned about, and we're going to take extra 20 minutes to make sure we're not exposed to that. Over here, I'm not as concerned. I think it's better to use the fast track, even if it does expose us to something and I know for me personally, just to throw that out there, is I usually do default to that. Oh, it's quicker, we'll just go this way, and believe that that's safer, and it's definitely not always safer. So better to actually analyze and make sure that what you think is, you're not just using it as a way to justify a decision that's lazy.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions. It's interesting. People are asking, how do you manage traffic for like classics in the spring where it gets a lot of travel?
Yeah, I mean, so we were going to wrap up here in the next 5-10 minutes, so I don't want to take too long, but I bumped into this the last twice this spring, and I used to always be one who was like, people make a big deal out of these different groups, and it doesn't happen that often, but you know what, it really is happening a lot these days. So I know we did the north face of Whymper a couple weeks ago on a day when we got up the first bench to look up and see the steep, big section, and there were 20 people ahead of us. And I was teaching Avalanche course at the time, and I was just like, that is too much. Like, how could we possibly move below this many people safely? And they're like, well, we're on a skin track, and it seems like it's working for everyone, but man, they all have to come down at some point, and that was just too much chaos for me. I was like, I think we need to. So we ended up waiting, dug a profile, did some other stuff, and let almost all of them come down before we went up. And that was how we dealt with it. We then bumped into a solo skier in the Granddaddy a few days later, and he was about halfway up, and we were able to get up to the changeover, and felt pretty awkward about it because he was having this solo experience, and it was really going to change it for him to have other people around, right? But we thought, the person I was with, it was going to be a big deal for them to do Granddaddy that day, so we made it, pushed up below him, and then just contacted him, like yelled up, he's looking down, kind of looked mad, and I was just like, hey, we can wait here till you're down, or we can catch you. And it was pretty obvious that we could catch them. And he said, oh, come on up, I'm happy for the help. So we went up and helped break trail, and he was happy for it. But we absolutely would have waited there at the bottom. And if we hadn't been able to talk to him, it was 100% our responsibility. Yeah. I think whoever is there first and is up high, like, it's not their responsibility what you do below them. That is an unreasonable expectation. I see Zoe nodding. Marcus, you guys have anything to add here? Like, I feel like everyone wants some sort of rule, or like what's right and wrong in these situations. And I just don't know how a person higher up on a face or line can be responsible for people below. And I think it's a really bad thing to make them wait. They're there, they're doing their thing. If you come up below them, man, you're taking all the risk, I think. I
agree.
Totally. It's like if someone's already on an ice climb and you are approaching from the bottom. If you're the one below, it's on you. They're already managing risk and up there doing it. So
I think like if someone wants something bad enough, like makes you leave first in the morning, right? Like the only times that I'm gonna go behind someone to like behind another group is if I'm 100% sure we can catch them. Like if I'm like certain that they're not that far away, that we're like, oh, they left like way earlier, and like we're gonna make like go help them. And I said whatever. Like, and it's only happened a few times, but like I have waited before like an hour and a half for someone to make it down Amers, like just because there was a person, we couldn't see her, and she came down and she waved at us, and we were like, oh, that was fun. And then we went up after she was done, right? And if there's multiple groups, and like there's always another day and another or somewhere else to go, right? Often there's a bunch of like other choices in the area, so you don't like. Yeah, I'm definitely like also not a big fan of going under people, and I agree that the responsibility like is not to the person who's at the top who got there like first. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like if you had decided I could catch these people, no problem, then you're going up. If they decide halfway they're bailing and they're going to ski down, well, they're going to be skiing down on top of you. That's the risk you took. Yeah. Does that talk to the questions there? I didn't see them, Joe, but someone was talking about groups on lines.
Yeah, and it's a new thing, being busy, but like, yeah, use your imagination and go try other stuff, and it's a bit of maybe a different season this year. We haven't had maybe that kind of like early March sort of like window where people get stuff done as much as maybe in the past few years. But some people were asking, is there like is there a hit list for springtime? I think the one thing that I like to point out or kind of emphasize here in the shop as well is, you know, the years that when you get into couloir skiing, like you don't, or a steeper skiing or any kind of big objectives, like you don't start with like the massive thing right away first, you know, you warm yourself up on some smaller kind of warm-ups, and then you see how you feel with that and how your skiing is that year and how your fitness is that year and how your skis are that year. And then you kind of like, you know, progress in that. And we see that often with people having a good kind of sequence, you know, oh, they start kind of small and oh, something a bit bigger and something a bit bigger. And then by May, they're like really comfortable with all the systems and the boot packing and a bit more exposure. And then like, that's kind of when the bigger lines get skied. But, you know, it's normal to kind of, you know, a bunch of fantastic skiers ski like, you know, warm-ups that they call like granddaddy, like once a year, because it's like a good, like, oh, well, how's my steep skiing this year kind of thing. And I think giving yourself time to progress into that is a really important thing, because you can't fall, right? And
yeah. Oh yeah, good point. Marcus, you spent a lot of time around different groups in the background. Did you have anything to add to that, the issue of just things getting busier? Or you don't have to touch it, you can just say no.
No, I mean, everything is said is right? Like, or at least my perspective. Personally, when I roll up to a couloir and there's another group, I'm not going up. I don't care. I'll go to the next couloir. The great thing about couloirs is generally if there's one couloir in the area, there's probably more, because it's the type of rock and the type of erosion that causes couloirs. And it's generally like, you know, if you go to Amers and you see people going up towards it, you know, you can go to Cobra, you know, like you can go to Eiffel if you've got the legs, you know, there's options. So, or you could just go ski some trees or something, like, you know, this idea that, I mean, I think my perspective is maybe a little bit different, because most of the time I ski full time and I have that luxury to be like, yeah, not today, but tomorrow or the next day or next day or next day or whatever. And then, you know, there's people that don't have that luxury where it's like, well, I have this one day this week or maybe this month or whatever, and I'm here and I want to do it. And I think for me, it's like a dangerous game when you're like, I am doing this today. I do not care. I don't care that there's 20 people above me or whatever. It's like, okay, I mean, but that's your call, right? And that's on you. And if you go up and they slough you out and you die or you get injured or whatever, you made that decision to be there in that circumstance. And you know, it's kind of a heavy thing to talk about, but it's like that's the way it is out there. So
yeah, no, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's not definitely not too heavy. That's the truth. And I mean, just the last thing I'll add there before we quit is just, you're not just, even the risk aside, you're really changing what's going on for their day. You know, if a group of 3 friends get to some line early and are skiing it together, and then all of a sudden, you know, 2 other groups show up and one, like, you're just kind of ruining their day too. It's just not.
Yeah, and you're affecting their decision making, right? Now they're questioning like shit, do we ski this? What do we do? Like, do we slow down, let them catch up? And then now you're causing objective hazards to go higher. Like if you're skiing 3-4 couloir and you're halfway up and it's May, and now you're like, well, these people are climbing, like, do we wait at the top to go down? Well, maybe you don't have the time.
Yeah.
Like, and now maybe that group that you're waiting to get up there has caused you to ski down an hour and a half later, and maybe that causes some kind of activity or
you're putting other people at risk too, right?
Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, I think we probably got enough there with that. Hey, yeah, we can get preachy. But I think we covered it all tonight, guys, and thanks everyone for hanging in there. That was a good hour 40. But yeah, you know, we talked a little bit about what we've been doing, what we're skiing, hopefully how this weekend's going, and then looking ahead to some big lines, some glaciers, and it was really cool. I think this time to get tips from everyone. I think Darren's gone, but I appreciated the rescue tips too from public safety. It's nice when those guys show up. And Zoe, we appreciate you taking your time out from Avalanche Canada to come talk to us, and especially as you're getting ready for your guides exam.
Good luck with the guides exams. That's so exciting.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's awesome to be on and catch up with all of you. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Nice. Marcus, we don't say it enough, but everyone can go to confessionsofaskibum.com to check out all the guidebooks you've done. They can buy copies at Ski Uphill, but they can also get it online. I find it really helpful to have on my phone. So I want to encourage everyone to make sure as you download it there, you make a donation, because there's definitely a lot of value you're getting there and a lot of work that's been done. So thanks, Marcus, for all those books.
My pleasure.
What do you got going on for next little bit, Marcus? You're not doing the guides exam. You getting out skiing?
Yeah, I'll be getting out skiing. I got some friends coming up from Utah soon here, so we'll be going out, I think, for 9 days or 10 days or something like that. So
nice.
Not probably just day trips, actually. I think they just got back from Antarctica and they're done camping. So
that seems fair.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And Joel, at Ski Uphill, you were saying that the big thing right now is the North American Championships. Is that what's going on at Kicking Horse?
Yeah, big weekend at Kicking Horse. So we're going to be at the Skimo North American Championships tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. That's kind of like the last. Well, there's Marmot Basin the week after, but that's like the kind of 2 closing weekends of the Skimo season, and then we're just going to go ski some steeps and some big lines, I guess. Sorry. But yeah, it's a busy time, and lots of stoked people and lots of people planning for bigger days and bigger objectives. So the staff is always super stoked to give people some data and some advice and answer some questions. But yeah, it's the it's always the time of the year that we kind of live for. It's exciting. Everybody's getting out. Everybody's having good days, and the days are longer, and the sun is nicer, and people get sunburnt really bad, and the classics, right? But yeah.
Yeah.
Always the
Everyone
good
comes in with goggle tans.
Oh my God, yeah, it's already starting. But yeah, it's the good time here at the store, and it's kind of what everybody in the Rockies waits the entire year for, right? You, Zoe, have been skiing powder all year, but in the Rockies we've been skiing facets all year.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to the big line season here. I know at MTN Guiding here, we're basically sold out for the rest of the year. Everyone's excited about spring. We got a steep skiing Avalanche course this weekend, which will be
super interesting, by the way. I
think it's gonna be really neat. Yeah, Scotty's running that, and it's gonna be a 3-day course on how to assess avalanche danger and deal with it in steeper terrain. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure we'll revise and do it more next season if people
let me know, because I would definitely sign up for that course.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I think that's it, crew. So high fives all around, and thanks for the night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
And have a good evening, and we'll see you all on the skin track.